Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the Winning Play Podcast. I'm your host, Drew James, here with my co-hosts, Rob Hugh and Kendall Capps. We're here to break down Week 13 in the Week 13 in the NFL, and get ready for Week 14 here in fantasy. Kendall, Rob, how you guys doing today? We're coming off two big teams, Eagles and Bills, making huge statements this week. Kendall, I'm going to kick it off to you first. Which team do you think made the bigger statement, or which team do you believe in more here? The Eagles coming off beating the Ravens close, or the Bills after trouncing San Francisco in that snow game on Sunday night?
You know, I think you can easily make an argument either side. Both, I've had reservations for both teams for much of the season, but Philadelphia continues to really impress me. And knowing Lamar Jackson, that stat, he was 23-1 against NFC opponents throughout his career. And they jumped out to an early 9-0 lead. Baltimore looked like they were in control of the game early. And Philadelphia they grinded them down. They just wore Baltimore out. And, you know, teams have really struggled to move the ball on the ground against them. And Saquon, even though he didn't have the 180 yards that he's been averaging lately, he still went just over 100 yards, ripped off a late fourth quarter touchdown run that basically put the game away. And I have to say, to go on the road in that spot, in that environment, knowing what Lamar typically does against NFC opponents, I think Philadelphia is really starting to prove me wrong, and it's hard not to consider them one of the absolute favorites to win the Super Bowl at this point.
Rob, what about you? How are you feeling?
I was going to say, I'm with you, Kendall. You can make an argument for either one. I mean, I like to throw the Lions in this debate, too, because I think the Eagles, the Lions, and the Bills are all playing the best football right now. The Eagles had the more impressive victory over the Ravens, obviously. I mean, they're usually a regular season buzzsaw, so that was more impressive. But I'm going to actually make the argument for the Bills that I believe in more, and that's just because I've seen them win in more multiple ways than the Eagles have. I haven't seen the Eagles have an impressive win on any team that shuts down Saquon, like as in I haven't seen them win through the air. Now, that requires shutting down Saquon, and we haven't seen that lately, so I don't want to knock the Eagles too hard for that, but I like what the Bills, and namely Josh Allen, can do in all different environments, all different situations, down wide receivers. When the Eagles were down wide receivers, they looked pretty awful. Anything can happen in the NFL season and things like that, so right now I trust the Bills just a little bit more because they have Superman at QB.
I love it. Personally, I'm going to take the Eagles here. They just beat the Ravens. When the Bills did go up against the Ravens, they got trounced. And the Eagles so far have been rolling through everybody they've met. We'll see if that keeps going. And we do see the Lions, I think, get to make that statement this week in a game that we'll talk about here coming up. Now, moving on to the Russ Wilson-led Pittsburgh Steelers. We debated at the beginning of the year, would this team win 8 games or 9 games? Here they sit currently 9-3, firmly in third place in the AFC. Is it time to start talking about the Steelers as Super Bowl contenders and stop wondering if they're actually good enough to win this division? Rob, I'm going to start with you here. How good are the Steelers?
I mean, they're a good team. And I don't know why it surprises any of us. Mike Tomlin, he just keeps churning out these road warrior teams. So it just depends what your definition of a true Super Bowl contender are, how many teams you have in that kind of qualification. I mean, they're definitely primed for a playoff run, and I like the football they're playing better than maybe the Chiefs or a team of that, playing at that level right now. I don't think they're quite on the level of the Eagles, Bills, Lions, or maybe, the Ravens, ironically, although if they play them head to head, that game can go any direction. But nobody wants to play them. They have a tough defense. They're always going to keep it close. And Russ and Pickens, they have a great chemistry and a great rapport right now. So they're definitely on like that tier 2 of playoff teams that I don't think anyone wants to play right now.
Well, I'll tell you, I think at this point, we all have to say they're at least legit contenders, right? They continue to win games, and they haven't beaten the best of teams, but they continue to win despite Russ looking great and the offense dropping 44, which obviously I think everyone knows the Steelers' offense wasn't capable of dropping 44 when Justin Fields was under center. Russ has certainly transformed that offense in that downfield passing game, but there is one caveat to that. We've watched the Steelers' offense struggle under Russ in the red zone. They had been among the league worst in the red zone. They finally had a great red zone performance. But guess what? That was against the Bengals defense, which was first in the NFL in red zone defense. Like, people have been scoring on Cincinnati all year long from everywhere on the field. So I can't put too much stock into that Steelers offense's ability to score touchdowns against a Chiefs defense in the playoffs, a Bills defense in the playoffs, a Ravens defense in the playoffs. I still need to see that. Now, they will play the Ravens again in a couple weeks in Baltimore, and it'll be really interesting to see what they do there. But until I see them do that against a legit defense, I certainly still can't put them in that same tier as maybe the top 4 or 5 teams in the league in terms of winning it all this year.
And speaking of Cincinnati's defense, like I'm gonna keep bringing up that I picked Joe Burrow as my preseason MVP because I'm not even gonna take a wrong on that because he has the numbers for the MVP. I just don't think anyone expected this Bengals defense to be so absolutely atrocious in all the ways. I mean, I don't know if I can remember a team with this record losing in as many points scored as they have this year. I mean, they might be going for a record for like under 500 teams with points scored. I mean, it's insane right now.
Did you hear what Jamar Chase said after the loss this week? Jamar Chase came out.
Score after every.
Yeah, reporter's like, "Well, do you feel like you need to score after every possession?" He's like, "Yeah, pretty much. Looks like that's what we're gonna have to do."
Another team that's underperforming and maybe cooked, the San Francisco 49ers. On the NFC side, came out, got their tails whipped by Buffalo. They also lose Christian McCaffrey for the season and his backup, Jordan Mason, for the season. So all you fantasy players who were thinking how smart you were for picking up Jordan Mason, it doesn't matter. He's gone as well. You got to go with Isaac Orendo if you're going San Francisco backs this week. But as far as the team goes, are they cooked for the year? Are they cooked for this dynasty, this grouping of players? Is this their final go-round? Kendall, what do you think?
All right, so big picture, are they capable of winning the Super Bowl this year? No, they are not going to win the Super Bowl this year, and it's very possible that their window of winning that is closed. And logically, I think you can obviously make the argument that the 5-6 years where they've been so close, they've been to 2 Super Bowls, losing to the Chiefs in crucial, in brutal fashion, losing 2 NFC championship games, like they've been knocking on the door and been so close. That's weighing heavy on this team. And knowing they're going to have to pay a number of people and they're going to lose some key guys on defense, the window is probably closing. But I am going to say that I do think that there is still a path for them to win their division this year. They're 2 games back of Seattle with the Rams and Arizona 1 game in between them. They still play all 3 divisional opponents this year. Everyone in that division plays each other. And Seattle has a really tough schedule the rest of the way. So I think with them being the leaders right now, if San Fran goes out, they typically own the Rams. They should have beaten the Rams earlier this year. They let a game get away. I'm guessing they beat the Rams in week 17 this year. If they beat Arizona, who they tend to play well against, and Seattle they've owned as well, like it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could win those 3 divisional games. And if that happens and then they win one of their other 2, they could still win that division, but it's going to require a lot, though.
Yeah, Kendall, I'm with you exactly on the big picture and the small picture. Big picture, it's not looking good for their future with this group, and then small picture, I'm with you that the division's still wide open. That's why I don't want to say that they're cooked, because I also think the last couple weeks have been a little misleading and distorting, right? They had the snow game, which is always hard, plus Brock was injured a little bit. The key for me is actually Trent Williams. So, he was out. The offensive line has really struggled, and he's actually dealing with a tragic death of an infant. So I don't know, for me, whether he comes back and actually plays real football. That's going to be the real key, even more than Brock Purdy and his shoulder. But like you pointed out, Kendall, I will say that division's wide open. I think last week I talked about I don't trust Arizona, and I still don't trust Arizona. Seattle is, talented, but super flawed on the offensive line. It's really an Achilles heel for that team. And then the Rams, I think I still have them winning the division. But, I think if San Fran can put a couple wins right in a row here together, they're right back in it.
I'm going to disagree with you guys here. Hey, Kendall, I think you might be reading the schedule wrong. They don't have any.
Yeah, they have a tough schedule.
Seattle. They don't play. They already played Seattle twice and split them.
They did play. I thought they had only played
2 games
once.
back of Seattle, and they don't play Seattle again. They do, however, still have to play the Lions. They have to play the Cardinals, the Rams, the Dolphins, who aren't an easy out. And then they get the Bears this week without Nick Bosa again, it's looking like, without Trent Williams, without Deebo Samuel. You might lose to the Bears. But being 2 games back, now he missed practice again today, but they haven't announced yet whether or not he's playing. But that being said, they're going to lose at least 1 to 2 of those games, which puts them 3 back of Seattle. I don't think they're getting crawling out of that hole. I could see anybody else winning that division, but even if they do beat Arizona and LA and the Dolphins and the Bears, they're probably not going to beat the Lions, and you're going to have to gain 3 games on the Seahawks. I don't know if Seahawks' schedule is that bad, and that's if everything goes as perfectly as it can for a team that it looks like the wheels are falling off on.
That's fair.
I mean, you're certainly on the side of logic.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just holding on to hope because of my season-long bet, and I'm going to get screwed by the Niners.
Well, let's talk about some other teams and whether or not we should still be holding on to hope for. Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, Sam Darnold and the Vikings, Tua and the Dolphins. Are these teams at this point just in spoiler territory? Do they have a chance of putting a run together here?
So I want to start with Minnesota because even though they found a way to win again, they're 10-2. They're only 1 game out of the division. You know, they still have a path to the 1 seed in the NFC and home field throughout. So, like, I got to give them their flowers for finding ways to win. But I'm watching them week after week after week, struggling to move the football for 3.5 quarters. And credit to Sam Darnold, he led them downfield for the game-winning touchdown when it mattered. And, like, you know, props, like some big plays when he had to. But how many times can they keep doing this? Aaron Jones is looking like a shell of himself the last handful of games. Darnold had that awesome start to the year, and we've seen him turn the ball over a lot. They skated by barely against the Jags. They barely beat the Titans. The entire AFC South, they had to come from behind. They did not look impressive in any of those. So even though I know their record says they're contenders, personally, I don't have them in that same Super Bowl bubble. So I just wanted to throw that out there that even though they're 10-2, I don't have them anywhere close to that same upper echelon of teams.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking for Minnesota to get Hawkinson more involved and then obviously target Justin Jefferson. I mean, you could say he was bracketed and blanketed and he was doubled, but you got to get the ball to your stars, and that's Justin. And Aaron Jones, I will say he looks okay on a per-touch basis, but he's had 4 fumbles in 3 games. I mean, that's you just can't play winning football that way or sustainable winning. But I want to switch gears over to Kirk Cousins in Atlanta because outside of the 2 games against my Bucks, Kirk Cousins has looked absolutely awful. I mean, like, no, absolutely awful. I mean, he has like 900 combined yards against R2 and then like what feels like less than that the rest of the season, which probably isn't factually true, but it feels like less than that. He just looks terrible, and it's an interesting situation because they got Penix first round, but you have Raheem Morris, who's kind of I know him from the Bucs days. He's kind of a veteran guy. And because of the money they threw and the politics around it, they're not going to bench Cousins in a traditional sense. Like, if he continues to struggle down the stretch and they do want to see a Michael Penix come in, I'm betting now that if that does happen, I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does happen, I bet you're going to see all of a sudden, an Achilles soreness or, a thigh issue or a hamstring issue. They're not going to bench Kirk. They're going to say, we're going to let him rest and let the season play out and things like that. But it's very concerning if you're a Falcons fan because your defense was never going to be your strength. And you were expecting Kirk to come in and be able to sling it around, and then you have your superstar running back Bijan to give all these touches to, and Bijan's doing his job. But, as a Bucs fan and as someone that called the Falcons preseason as being a season-long disappointment, I'm very happy as both a podcaster and a Bucs fan. But Drew, I think there's someone maybe you probably want to talk to. So how about yourself, man? Is there somebody
first,
in that same?
I'll agree with both of you. I think the Vikings look fraudulent. I think the Falcons, who are still in the lead of their division, I think are not going to make the playoffs. I think the Bucs will win that division. You look at Tampa Bay's schedule the rest of the way is cake. They could easily win 4 or 5 of these next games without even looking that good. The Falcons have dropped 3 straight. I think it's over. As for the Dolphins, I mean, it's over. The way their schedule is, it's easy enough that I think they can make things interesting the last week of the season, force Denver to win their last game. But I think that's about all that'll happen there. I mean, this Thanksgiving Day game for the Dolphins was over within 5 minutes of the start of the game.
Yep.
Great muffed punt on the first drive. Green Bay goes up 14-0. After that, I think the Dolphins outscored them. It didn't really matter. It wasn't at any point close. It was completely out of hand from the start. And they keep dropping these snow games, and now you're hearing lots of conversation about rifts in the locker room and guys thinking the team's soft, and they're mad that the coach was standing by a heater at halftime. To me, if you're blaming the coach standing by a heater for why you aren't performing on the field, you need to go to another team anyways. But there's issues there that go beyond Tua, who, since Tua has returned, looks like the best quarterback in the AFC. He's about to set the league record for completion rate if he continues at this point. I think the last 3 weeks straight, he's fantasy QB1. Tua is not throwing picks. Tua is not the one muffing the punts. But there are a lot of problems on that Dolphins team, starting with the offensive line, the safeties, the linebacking core, a lot of stuff that needs work. So I think the Dolphins, the clock has ticked on them. I think they will make it look close at the end of the year, but I don't think it's actually that close.
Best QB in the AFC is quite the statement, but yeah, no, he's definitely
for the last 6 weeks.
But we're talking about reality.
He won AFC Player of the Month last month. He is in reality playing very well.
Geno Smith led the league
but no one.
Geno Smith led the
is
league in
seriously
completion
going to call him the
percentage
best
last
quarterback
year,
in the
and we're
AFC.
not calling him the best QB. No, I mean, Tua's got that. I mean, in a very strict sense, because we've seen the offense without Tua. I mean, you could make an argument about Tua as MVP, even on a team that doesn't technically qualify for that.
He at least proved his value this year. We will say
100%. Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Well, let's move on here. Let's move on to the fantasy fallout. What we saw coming out of last week. The fantasy running back landscape is changing here. Some guys that we've always counted on, Christian McCaffrey, gone. Even his backup gone. But we also have some new names that are kind of creeping their way into the top 10. So I'm going to kick it off to you guys. Our Bucky Irving prophets. The two guys, Kendall, I know you were saying by the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, you kept saying Bucky Irving would be starting. Since the beginning of the year, Rob has been on this show preaching Bucky Irving every week. So you guys have got to be happy seeing him step up in Tampa Bay and kind of take that job.
Well, not only has he taken the job, which it took a little bit longer than I predicted. When we were back in preseason, I said by week 6 he'd be the starter. Took more like 10 weeks or so for him to actually take over the number one duties. But, he's been getting more snaps and touches the last couple of weeks. So I think that would, qualify him as the starting running back in Tampa Bay. But I digress. What he has been able to do, though, the last month and a half, and I don't think a lot of people really understand the consistency in production on a per-touch basis, which, Rob, I know you have a number of stats to back this all up. But, this week, it's the first time that he led all running backs. He was the overall RB1 in week 13, and he's become in every week RB1 in fantasy going forward. And, at this point, is he not going to be one of the guys that's a league winner on a number of fantasy teams, especially given that aforementioned cupcake schedule for the Bucs down the stretch?
Yeah, Kendall, I'm with you, man. He's incredible, and him and Chase Brown, I feel like, have got to be the top two guys in that running back position you put under that guy's league winner, right? I mean, it's a guy you get lower in the end of whether drafts or waivers, and then all of a sudden they come in and they're throwing at least 20 points a game and get you in there. But yeah, I don't want to always bog down everything with stats, but I gotta throw the shout out to the guy because on a yards per touch basis, he's behind only Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry, and that's and then yards per route
pretty
run.
Good company.
Yards per route run as a receiver, he's number one in the league, and that's over Austin Eckler and Devon Achane. But the most important one as well is yards per. He leads the league at 5'9", 185 in yards after contact per rush. I mean, we're talking about a guy that his one knock really as a pro is the top speed marker. So he won't be busting out these 70-yard touchdown runs like Saquon will, but guess what? He's got incredible vision, incredible creativity, and surprising strength, So he's a fantastic runner, and I love what he's doing. And as far as in fantasy, you look at the schedule of the Bucs, and it's nothing but gravy. It's a gravy train the rest of the way. He's got the Raiders. The only one is the Chargers. Maybe that'll help out, but with the way that Liam's got this offense, this running offense, going from like last in the league for the last couple of years to where we're at now, we're a top 5 running offense. I mean, I'm not even really worried about the Chargers so much, So Chargers, Raiders, Cowboys, Panthers. I mean, we talked about it, league winner.
All right, well, how about a couple of running backs that we're watching drop in the rankings? I'm going to give you 3 names. You guys let me know who concerns you the most. Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, and Kenneth Walker III. Rob, I'll let you shoot first.
This is more of like my preseason predictions and where I had him on a couple teams and everything like that. The one who concerns me the most is Kenneth Walker. I would say Aaron Jones' concern is more about fumbles lately, and if he just doesn't fumble the ball, they won't take him out of the game, and he won't have these negative points because he's actually looked solid when he's holding on to the ball. So Ken Walker is the guy I'm more concerned about because he's such a talented runner, and I know I picked him up everywhere I could because I saw the writing on the wall for what he could do. But that offensive line on Seattle is so bad. He's also been nicked up with injuries throughout his career, and it's coming up now with him being limited in practice. But most importantly is I don't like his usage on this team anymore. At the beginning of the year, he was surpassing expectations because they were using him all the time in the passing game, which was more than what was previous. But lately in these last couple games, they get down into the red zone and they just keep giving the ball to Charbonnet. They must love what he does at the goal line, which I don't understand because Walker is just better in every way when it comes to avoiding tackles, when it comes to creativity, vision. He's better in all the ways. So I don't really understand it, but they keep giving it to Charbonnet. Like the last game, they just gave it to Charbonnet 3 straight times and didn't even get in. So I'm most concerned about Kenneth Walker because I think that you got him higher than you got DeAndre Swift, who I'm not super high on either.
But either way, regardless of where you're getting the guys, like for much of the season, they've been in starting lineups, unless teams were really, really deep or it's really shallow leagues, right? And so for me, if I'm looking forward now, because we're heading into week 14, this is the final week of the fantasy regular season, and then we get to the playoffs. And DeAndre Swift, when you look at his schedule, it is brutal in the playoffs. After this week against San Fran, which, they're a middling rush defense. They're not great. They're not terrible. But then in your first round matchup, he's going to play at Minnesota. And Chicago's offense has already been hot and cold. You never know what you're going to get. If you get the bad Caleb, you're going to get no production out of the running back spot. And if you get good Caleb, but it's a really difficult rush defense like Minnesota, you still might not get a whole lot. And then the week after that, he gets the Detroit Lions in the fantasy semis. And it's like, I can't start DeAndre Swift in either of those spots. Whereas Kenneth Walker, at the very least, has some really positive matchups and potential game scripts coming up against Arizona, who's a bottom 3rd rush defense in the NFL, Green Bay, bottom 3rd rush defense in the NFL. And then if you make the championship, Chicago's rush defense, which was really stout the first 6-7 weeks of the season, has actually been really, really bad the last 6 weeks. So I feel like the opportunity there is at least, there is a chance for Kenneth Walker to succeed. Now, I agree with you that offensive line is a mess. They clearly like Charbonnet, so there's a lot of concern there. But if I'm ranking them, I'm probably I put Aaron Jones first, Walker second, and I have to put Swift third just because I just don't see much production coming from that running game with that schedule coming up.
Well, Walker's had some good matchups, but over the last month, I don't even think he's passed like 13 points in full PPR. So I mean, it's pretty.
Honestly, I don't think any of these guys really have the last few weeks, which is kind of why they're here.
Aaron Jones had like a 22-point
rankings.
game a couple weeks ago. Yeah. But
well, I think
these
Kendall,
guys are
I think I'd agree with you on where I'd rank those guys. I will say, if for DeAndre Swift owners, there is some hope out there. We don't know what the new coach is going to do, so there's a chance something gets better. Maybe they change. I mean, it could
go ahead
be
and
much
tell
worse
Bears fans that.
Well,
Hey,
for
Bears went
fans,
for
I
the
don't know,
double post coach bump. They said they worked the first time. Let's do it again.
Yeah, so there is some chance maybe they get him some more catches. Maybe they find something to do with him that the old coach wasn't doing. I'm not saying I think it's going to happen, and I do have him last. But, you can hold on to him with some hope that things might improve somewhat. So let's talk real quick about the Chiefs' backfield. Isaiah Pacheco came back this week. It's kind of a split with him and Kareem Hunt. But which of those guys do you want? Is Pacheco going to go back to the usage he was getting Are they going to continue splitting? Is it going to separate a little more? Kendall, what do you think is going to happen in this backfield with the Chiefs?
So I have to say, Rob, last week, you detailed very, very pinpoint accurate on how reluctant you were to start Pacheco first week back, and you were right. Like, Hunt was still on the field considerably, but Hunt also, once again, didn't look very good. Just like he hasn't looked very good all year. His yards per touch, yards per carry, yards after first contact, all subpar. And Pacheco ripped off a 40-yard run, which that's what he was shown to have done in the past. So even though last week it was close to a 50-50 split, I felt in the league where I started him, I didn't have much of a bench. I felt I was forced to start him, but I feel better about him going forward, seeing that now we've seen the two on the field, and Andy Reid was quickly reminded that one of these running backs is not over 30 and is explosive, and the other one is over 30 and is no longer explosive. So I think we will start to see a separation, and knowing how much they still run the ball in the red zone, I do think that Pacheco might work his way back into back-end RB1 status potentially, but there's almost no chance that he's going to put up what you drafted him for, which was a top 5, top 6 running back, I think.
Yeah, I'm actually still down on that. I don't want any part of this backfield because I'll tell you what, because in addition to the Pacheco-Hunt split, Samaje Perine is getting the obvious passing down still. So there's 3 backs in that backfield that are getting reps. And even though I think that they'll ratchet up Pacheco a little bit over the next couple of weeks, I don't even see him as a back-end RB1 right now. I think his best-case scenario, even by like week 16 for the semis for a lot of fantasy football, I think is like RB2 status, and that's hoping everything goes his way because I didn't like what I saw in that backfield. Obviously, Pacheco has the most talent of anyone. I'm not denying any of that, but I'm just talking about pure usage from a fantasy standpoint. And while I do think Hunt's going to get faded down the stretch for sure, and as Pacheco gets ratcheted up, I didn't like that Perine was also getting dedicated passing work consistently, and I don't see any reason why that would go away because I think it's from a pure pass protection and receiving back standpoint. I think Andy's going to still lean on Perine down the stretch. So, yeah,
Well, but remember the last couple of years, that was Jerick McKinnon's role, right? And McKinnon
100%.
would occasionally have pop games, but while he had those pop games, we saw Pacheco still put up numbers.
Yeah, but there wasn't a Hunt on that too. And I'm not saying that Hunt has it, but we just have to be realistic about how teams utilize these guys, especially if they've helped you all year and stuff. So it's a little risky. We'll see how it goes. I definitely feel confident about him not being more than an RB3 for this week coming up. And I don't really see the usage that you're talking about even on RB2 until maybe like week 16 as they ratchet him back up. This wasn't a minor injury. This was truly like a fractured leg. So, I mean, he's got to get worked back in slowly, but.
Alrighty. Well, let's go on. Let's talk over to the wide receiver side. We saw this week Jerry Jeudy went off for the Browns, and so did Jameis. Terry McLaurin kind of okay, but 2 touchdowns. Looks like he's still in your lineup for a few more weeks. Keenan Allen went off. DJ Moore went off. Roma Dunze didn't go off, so we kind of see how Chicago's shaking out. Which of these big wide receivers who are kind of coming on late, Kendall, who do you think is going to be able to keep that going here in the last week of the season and into the fantasy playoffs?
Well, last week when we talked about Terry McLaurin, and both of you guys had, exhaustively talked about how he wasn't getting target share. He had been getting, 2, 3, 4 targets game after game, and therefore his production was hampered. Well, last week he gave you what you were hoping for. He got significantly more targets. He had 75 yards receiving, scored twice, and Washington's offense and Jaden Daniels finally looked, more like what we were accustomed to seeing from them earlier in the season. So among those guys, I still think there's much fluctuation from Jameis, and he's so matchup dependent that I can't trust Jameis to throw for 497 on a weekly basis. Like, that's not going to happen. He's going to have a couple games where he probably throws for 210 and still the 2 picks, and Jeudy might have 50 yards receiving. Because they also have Elijah Moore there, who is also getting plenty of looks and balls thrown his way as well. So it's hard for me, even though Jeudy has been blowing up as of late, I personally don't feel like I can trust him week in and week out right now. So I would trust the proven guy that I've seen do it for a few years on an offense that, at the very least, we've seen them look elite, and they have some pretty good matchups in the playoffs. They got the Saints coming up. They got the Falcons in a couple weeks. So given that, I'd probably take McLaurin over a guy like Jerry Jeudy, even though I get the argument of Jeudy just had the game of his career.
Yeah, the single best revenge game statistically of all time. But guys, there have been five 235 plus yard receiving games in the league. And there's one by Tyreek Hill, two by Jamar Chase, and two by Browns receivers after season-ending injuries to Deshaun Watson. So there was one last year with Joe Flacco, and then Jeudy this year with Jameis Winston. It's crazy, dude. Like, what are they gonna do with? They gotta bench Deshaun, bite the bullet, and eat all that cap money.
That's a lot of money to eat. What was it? $235 million.
Insane, fully guaranteed. So insane. And they deserve all of that came their way for doing
100%.
That. It was ridiculous. Yep. No, I'm with you on McLaurin as far as like the steady production. I think I feel the safest with McLaurin. I will say I do think Judy's got a couple more boom games in him just because it doesn't matter what the coverage is, doesn't matter how tight it is, doesn't matter if he's open. Jameis is going to sling it to that spot. He makes his decisions like on a whim, and then you're not going to tell him to go off of whatever he wants to do. So, the Keenan Allen, DJ Moore thing, I love what Caleb's been doing lately, and I do think he's going to be putting up yardage as they fight, all in the second half, because the first half he always looks terrible, and the second half he throws for like 300 yards. So, but the problem with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore is we're talking about two guys on the same offense, right? So even if Caleb is slinging it, they're going to eat into each other's like consistency of production a little bit. So I'm with you on McLaurin as the steady one, but Jeudy with the booms.
Well, all right. Well, Rob, real quick, I wanted to know, you've kind of crept back onto the back end of the Titans train here. I know you've got Nick Westbrook-Akine, TD in 7 of the last 8 games. Is that going to keep going? Are you finally put him in your starting lineup this week? How much do you trust him?
No, I'm actually doing reverse black magic on the league I have him in because it's my snake bitten league, and actually I proved the last 2 weeks that I'm correct on how snake bitten it is because I've been gaming the rest of my leagues by putting the guys I want to go off on my bench on purpose in that league, and it has worked. Last week, all of them went for over 20 points, so thank you. Yes, statistically and by all logic, Westbrook-Akine cannot keep getting away with this. He's been having like 3 or 4 receptions and touchdowns or multiple touchdowns in 7 of 8. But honestly, it's not 3, 4, 5 games. It's over 2 months and 7 games. And just recently he had 2 touchdowns. Anytime they get anywhere close to the red zone, Levis looks for him. Anytime they get anywhere close to the red zone, Levis looks for him. And, he's on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Speak too loudly about it, guys, but Will Levis is actually over the last month been a pretty solid, consistent fantasy producer without the negatives. He's only had like 2 interceptions over the last month. So it's a weird situation here, and it's scary to rely on any of these Titans players, but they are some contributors.
Even though, they started making me believers that they were actually going to show up in Washington, and then they were down by 30 at half. So
that was another thing I was going to say about the Terry McLaurin thing was like, dude, the Titans, I watched that game. The Titans could not have fumbled.
I'm sorry.
It's crazy. If you watch that game, by the way, the early slot, all those games, I've never seen more fumbles in one slot, in one like slate of games in my entire life. Cause I was watching like 4 at once. Dude, there were all the Dolphins fumbles and the Titans fumbles and the Aaron Jones fumbles. It was like fumbles everywhere on all the games, multiple ones. Titans could not have fumbled and gifted Washington those points any more than that. Like, it was a crazy game to watch at the beginning.
Which explains, because I didn't watch a single play of that game intentionally. And I'm glad, like, every time I looked up, Washington had scored again. And I was like, how the fuck do they keep scoring touchdowns this quickly? And now I know Tennessee was just fumbling the ball away.
All right, guys. Well, let's move on to next week here. Let's start looking at Week 14. We've got key games starting off tonight, kicking off the week, one of the best Thursday games yet. We've got Lions-Packers. Lions favored at home by 3.5. Kendall, which side of this are you falling on?
I like Green Bay. I think they're an absolute live dog. They very well might win this game, and I have a lot of reasons why I think this. So, in that second half on Thanksgiving, when the Lions nearly choked away and probably should have lost that game, everyone will, remembers the meltdown of Chicago, which, by the way, I was tweeting about it when that happened. I even said at the moment, I think I texted you guys that their head coach, he's not even going to be allowed back on the team plane. That was one of the most mismanaged clocks and endgame situations I've ever seen in 32 years of watching the NFL. That almost overshadowed some of the serious issues that Detroit has with their defense. So if you remember back the first month of the season, what did we say about the Lions? Offensively, they're loaded. They can score with anybody. Their defensive line is stout. You can't run on them. But the back end has some holes. And we saw a number of teams gain big plays downfield in the passing game. Then they kind of shored that up a little bit. And even when they lost Hutchinson, they brought in Zadarius Smith, and their defensive line as a unit played well together. Well, guess what? In that game against the Bears, they lost all three of their other starting defensive linemen. Zadarius Smith left the game twice with an injury. They might be down 5 starters on defense. And if there's one thing we've seen from Jordan Love and that Packers offense, remember, Miami's secondary has been one of the best in the league. Did that slow down Jordan Love in that passing?
The safeties have been the worst. Worst graded safeties in the league.
Well, yards allowed through the air, Miami has been among the league leaders all year. Did that slow down Jordan Love in the passing game? No. When Jordan Love has played, they have moved the ball at will in every game this year. And against that defense, missing those guys who now, without any defensive line starters as well, and Josh Jacobs going bonkers week after week after week, I love the Packers. I don't know if they win it, but knowing that's sitting at 3.5, if they do lose it, I love the hook as well. Give me Green Bay all day.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm bullish on the Packers in this game for an outright win. I'm with you for all the reasons you talked about. The Lions have 8 defensive starters that are out. Some of those are on IR, some of those are season-ending injuries. It's just untenable. That run defense is not going to be what it was. I see a game for Josh Jacobs again, 2 touchdowns probably is what I'm thinking. And I'm very high on this. The over-under is 51 too, so it's going to be a fantasy Lollapalooza game. And I just see the Packers being able to put up points. I think this is a great game. It's in the dome, so you don't got to worry about any weather or anything like that. I'm with you, Kendall, for all the same reasons, except for I see Packers with an outright victory here.
Well, I'm going to take the Lions here. I know the Lions are dealing with a lot of injuries. So are the Packers.
Really? They're getting Jair back.
No, Jair's out tonight.
Did they rule him out?
Yes.
Because he practiced yesterday and the day before, I believe.
I thought I saw that he had been ruled out. Let me double check that, because that is part of.
Yeah, I didn't look this morning.
Alexander I think is still out, and Romeo Dobbs is out.
Yeah, Dobbs is out.
Alexander is out tonight.
Okay.
So missing those guys, they're playing at Detroit. To me, Detroit's just looked really, really good, and the Packers. A couple things we know if the Packers are playing. Yeah, they're going to score points. Jordan Love's going to throw a pick, which the Lions have been able to capitalize on. But so far, the Lions, to me, pretty much look like the best team in the NFL. Like, I haven't seen anybody that I really think I would take over the Lions at this point. So I'm going to keep riding the Lions train while it's rolling. But let's move on here to Seahawks at the Cardinals. The Cardinals favored by 2.5. Big divisional game. 1-game spread between these two teams at the top of the division. Kendall, who are you taking there?
I think these two teams are relatively evenly matched. Divisional foes, when that tends to happen, I usually think they're going to split season series. Seattle won 16-6 2 weeks ago. So I think Arizona gets the win this time and pulls even in the division.
Are you taking them to 2.5 points there?
Yeah, they're going to. Yeah, I'm almost never going to take a dog unless I think they're going to win if the line's at 2.5. 89% of games are won by 3 points or more. So yeah, I'll lay the 2.5.
My gut says to agree with you, Kendall, because I am on that same exact boat where I feel like they're evenly matched, so they're most likely to split the series. But again, I've just been kind of on this train where I don't trust the Cardinals. Sometimes they touch their ceiling with the type of team, and I think when they play their best, they're a better team than Seahawks. But I like what the Seahawks defense has been doing lately, and they shut the Cardinals down last game. So I think the Seahawks defense is going to keep rolling. I think the offense is going to do just enough. So even though the Cardinals have had kind of a sneaky good secondary lately, I'm going to take the Seahawks here with another upset. So I'm going two Vegas upsets in a row right here.
I'm going to go with the with the Cardinals here as well, Kendall. Rob, you are right. The Seahawks shut the Cardinals down the last time they played, but the Cardinals shut the Seahawks down as well. I think that game was 16-6, and there was a pick six by the Seahawks. So neither offense did anything the last time they played. I think the Cardinals are the most likely offense to wake up, and I like what Kendall said about splitting the season series. That swung me. So I'll go with Kendall there. Let's look over to the big AFC West showdown. The Chargers at the Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 4. These games between these two teams are usually very close. The Chiefs have a chokehold on the division there, but Kendall, do you think the Chargers break through this time and take it back?
I mean, I've been saying for 3 weeks now that Chargers were going to win this game, and I've seen nothing from either team that makes me want to change that pick. Now, don't get me wrong. I've also been a proponent of the Chiefs, and they're making their own luck a lot of the times. And, you know, they play sound situationally and this and that, and all that is accurate. But you can't hide from the fact that they're not playing that well, and they're barely beating very bad teams. And it's not like they're trying to just barely win. No, they're trying to go out and win by 30, but they're only winning by 3 against the Raiders and the Panthers and all these teams. And the Chargers are a physical bunch, and I know their offense still looked atrocious last week. I think they only had 175 yards of offense in Atlanta last week, which is somewhat crazy, and that might have a lot to do with J.K. Dobbins' injury from the week prior and the offense still not getting going. But I just don't trust the Chiefs to cover any spread at this point, and so I think the Chargers will keep this game close. They're a live dog, so I guess I'll take the points with the Chargers. Give me the 4.
Yeah, so I'm going to have the Chiefs winning this game because Ladd McConkey's hurt. The Dobbins injury's out. I do not like the Chargers offense right now. It just looks totally defunct. The Atlanta defense is not even good, and they just looked awful against them, to be honest. So I think the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs defense has actually been really underperforming lately, even on the run defense, I mean, the Raiders ran all over them and stuff like that. So I don't love what the Chiefs are doing either. But I'm just really nervous for the Chargers because Ladd McConkey is the only thing they have going on offense, and he's really banged up. I mean, he was hurt in that game. The whole game he was playing, you could tell he was in a lot of pain. So I don't really like what's going on there. I think if this game wasn't so important to the Chargers division and all that stuff like that, I think Ladd would have been out, to be honest. But I actually have the Chargers covering the spread here. The Chiefs have been awful against the spread for like 2 years now. So, you know, I'm gonna be with you. I'm gonna take the points with the Chargers, but with the Chiefs to win.
Well, I'm taking the Chiefs. I'm taking the Chiefs to cover. Kendall mentioned that the Chiefs have only been beaten up on bad teams. One of the bad teams they beat up on already was the Chargers. And yeah,
They're
the Chargers.
8-4. I wouldn't call them a bad team.
Well, you just said that the only team that the Chiefs have are beating up on bad teams.
Mostly, lately, they beat the Raiders,
Okay.
They beat the Panthers. You know what I'm saying?
The Chargers offense, I've been saying for weeks here, their offense is horrible. Then they lost Dobbins. Now it looks like they're down McConkey. This is a Chargers team that could only put up 10 points on the Chiefs when they played before at home with those guys healthy. Now they're playing on the road in Kansas City. Those guys are out. The Chiefs have more weapons than they had the last time they played the Chargers. With DeAndre Hopkins, Juju maybe back, having Pacheco back. They didn't have any of those guys the last time when they beat the Chargers 17-10. So I'm going to take the Chiefs, and I'm going to take the Chiefs to cover here. But let's move over to the NFC for a minute. Vikings, Falcons.
By the way, just a quick correction. McConkey is not out. He's practice limited all week.
Yeah, he's not out. But he is very hurt. He's multiple things like knees and shoulders and all that stuff. I thought he was going to get knocked out of the game last week. It was tough to watch him because he's not big, but he's ballsy and he's their main focal point. So he'll be running all over the field getting stuff.
He's a gamer.
Yeah.
So while you were watching that Titans-Skins game, I was actually watching that game. I saw almost every play of that game, which, oh my God, Kirk Cousins, that might have been one of the worst games I've seen a pro quarterback. Like, he just kept throwing it directly. It wasn't even like great plays by the Chargers. He was just rattled, didn't know what to do with the ball, and just threw it randomly in the air, and there was always 3 Chargers there.
Yeah, the Schadenfreude is so
a
good.
Gamer. Like, he was banged up, like you said, throughout that whole game, and you could see the pain he was in, and he fought through it. So I feel confident that he's going to give it a go this week. And the Chiefs secondary has been not very good. I mean, the Raiders were slinging the ball. Aiden O'Connell picking them apart like nothing.
But the Raiders'
all
offense
game.
is definitely better than the Chargers' offense.
But yeah, we didn't get to talk about, just quick shout out to friggin' Brock Bowers, though. Oh my God. I mean, I know this is like way out of bounds, but we got to just at least say one thing about the kid. I mean, he's amazing. He is
Well, I'm sure
amazing,
he'll be
dude.
coming up in the fantasy playoffs here because he's another guy
Well,
that
yeah.
might have league winner next
When
to his name.
when we get to the fantasy playoffs, I think we'll retouch on how we want to tackle some of this stuff because we're all going to be taking a different view into fantasy next week as we enter the playoffs because everything kind of changes in terms of
As
players
some of us
and
enter
teams
the
that are available.
playoffs. Some of us won't.
Oh, I know
Kendall
I'll
and
be
I
entering the playoffs.
we have a play-in fantasy game this weekend for the playoffs
Yes.
that I'm going to.
But that's not in the league of record. The league of record where I've scored 400 more points than everyone in the league. That one I'm already a shoe-in.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on to the NFC. Two teams we talked about earlier as possible Cinderella's about to turn into pumpkins. I know that's not how the fairy tale goes, but we're going to leave the metaphor there. Falcons at the Vikings. Vikings favored by 6. Should the Falcons be looking at Michael Penix? Should Kirk Cousins be looking at his own team when he throws the ball? How can the Falcons make this close?
I'm telling you, man, like it was throw after throw. Each pick got worse than the one prior. I implore anyone listening, take a minute and just Google Cousins interceptions versus Chargers. In your mind, your head will explode because they were some of the worst throws that I've seen a quarterback make. It was literally like he went like this and was throwing a football.
The end zone interception was terrible. Yeah, that end zone interception was crazy. Yeah. But sorry, continue.
But despite that, I love the Falcons in this spot on the road getting 6 points. I don't know if they're winning this game, but Minnesota, they ain't winning by a touchdown against anybody these days. They've played poorly against so many teams and had to come from behind. And I'm not saying Atlanta's going to win this game, but it's in a dome, which certainly is going to help things a little bit for Atlanta. Every time you expect Atlanta to juke, what's that saying? Like when you expect them to do one thing, they do the other. They're a difficult team to figure out. And again, I don't think they necessarily win this game, but 6 points is far too much considering almost every Falcons game for like 3 years finishes within one score. So I'm going to take Atlanta on the road with the points.
Well, the Falcons are my Jets this year, Drew, to put it in terms you can understand. Definitely picking against them. The Vikings' defensive strength is their pass rush and their run defense. Now, their secondary is really leaky, so I actually think Kirk is going to be able to move it between the 20s. I could see this being a game where he puts up a little bit more yardage. But I do think, because Kirk is terrible under pressure, I think the Vikings are going to get pressure on him and sacks. So I think it's going to be a game where the Vikings offense, at least on that side, moves the ball a little bit until these big negative splash plays made by the Vikings defense. So I could see another multi-interception game happening here. That being said, I would pick, because of the reasons Kendall kind of outlined with a little bit of the inconsistency on the offense with the Vikings, I would pick, no, I'm not going to pick the Falcons to win, but I would pick them to cover. I think the Vikings win by 5 in this game. But I think the score is going to be different than what you actually see watching the game. I think the Vikings are going to kind of handily have this and have the Falcons maybe make a push and then Kirk gets sacked or throws an interception here. I think the Vikings are just the better team overall.
Oh, for sure.
I'm going to go Vikings here. I think that defense is going to score enough points to cover the spread. But let's go on, take a quick look at a few of these other games here. We don't have to go into all the spreads. But my Jets, the actual Jets, facing off in Miami against my Dolphins. I think you guys know I'm taking the Dolphins here. What about you?
Yeah, you got to take Miami. The Jets just end the season. I've been saying it for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think if you're a Dolphins fan, you're excited for this game. I think the Dolphins look good.
Aaron Rodgers is calling out Woody Johnson now. Like, what is going on?
I'm excited to be happy for a Sunday, but the Dolphins are pretty good against bad teams at home, so I'm going to take the Dolphins here.
Definitely.
We've got Jaguars going to Tennessee to face the Titans in a game very relevant for draft positioning. Who you guys got?
I have the Titans. I think they roll here, but I will say I do think that Mac Jones and that Jacksonville offense is gonna surprise people with some production. But I got the Titans here.
I'm going to take the Jags in an upset, mostly just because, one, who no one cares or is going to watch this game, and two, it'll help positioning for my Pats in the NFL draft. So let's go Jags.
All right, I'm going to take the
Actually,
Titans.
I think Will Levis looks good in this game. Mark my words.
I'm going to take the Titans. No Trevor Lawrence, and the rest of the Jaguars are playing. That's not good for the Jaguars. How about Saints, New York Giants in another blockbuster game, sure to fire up the ratings? I'm going to take the Saints with a question mark. Kendall.
I got the Saints. even though they lost to the Rams, their offense actually looked competent for much of that game. I saw a lot of that game. And Kamara looked really, really good. He just didn't get a ton of touches in the second half. And the Giants are a dumpster fire, so I got to take the Saints.
The Saints should win this game, but I'm going to take the Giants with the upset. I think this is a big game for Tyrone Tracy, and the Saints are not, their starting cornerbacks are not the two starting cornerbacks that they had even halfway through the season. So, I think this is going to be an interesting game for Drew Lock. They were a mess last week, but he's had a week to have all the reps with the team and work under this. I think it's actually a pretty good game for Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy, and even Wan'Dale Robinson. So I'm going to take them with an upset. They shouldn't win, but...
All right, well, speaking of upsets, we're going to get to what might be my upset of the year pick. I'm going to take the Panthers to beat the Eagles this week. The Panthers have been within 3 points of upsets, big games the last 2 weeks. I think this is a trap game for the Eagles. I don't know that it's actually going to happen, but I'm throwing my hat in the ring for upset of the year, and if I call it, I get to come back and tell you guys how I'm a genius next week. Kendall, I'm going to assume you're taking the Eagles here.
I'm going to take the Eagles. I do love Carolina plus 12.5. They've played so well against some really good football teams, and they've won a couple games lately. They're a different football team than we saw for the first 8 weeks of the season, but I can't possibly take them to win outright, though.
No, they're the league's worst rush defense against Saquon Barkley and the Eagles. So, I'm not, and the Eagles defense is really freaking good. Their really secondary good. Is incredible, and their rush defense is one of the best. So I just know I can't. Based on the process of how I usually do these, there's just nothing there for the Panthers for me. So,
all right, so no love for my upset pick. Let's move to the AFC. We've got a rematch of the snow game from a couple weeks ago, Browns versus Steelers. Can the Browns pull off another spoiler upset against Pittsburgh, or has Pittsburgh figured them out?
No, it's a split. It's certainly a split. Like I said a few weeks ago, I picked the Browns for that game. That was their Super Bowl. Pittsburgh gets revenge. They still have a division that they're trying to win. They're even trying to move up. They have an outside shot at home field advantage. Too much on the line for Pittsburgh at home. Give me the Steelers.
Yeah, Pittsburgh Steelers defense is going to show the other Jameis. So it's definitely going to be Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you guys and take the Steelers here.
You thought about it.
I did think about it. If I could switch upset picks, maybe I'd go with that one instead, but too late. The Raiders at the Buccaneers. Rob, can you guys get it done here, or is this going to be a red flag if the Raiders can come out and play with you?
I will say I don't think, you kind of gave them a little credit earlier. I don't think the Raiders offense is getting enough credit right now. Aiden O'Connell actually looks pretty good. He looks better than Gardner Minshew kind of ever did. At least last week he did. And our passing defense is suspect for sure, but I just don't think I got ultimate trust in Liam Cohen in this offense. I love watching this offense, so I got the Bucs going on. I think we do enough, and I think we win by about like 5 or 6 points.
Yeah, I'm going to take Tampa. It should be close. And like I said, Aiden has looked pretty solid, and he has a couple legit weapons with Jacoby Myers and their stud tight end that we're going to get into a lot more next week. But it's hard to take them to pick this upset. I like Tampa Bay. Their offense is just too good. And the use of those backs and Mike Evans, I think they'll take care of business.
I'll make it a trifecta. I'm going to take Tampa Bay there. How about Bills at Rams or in LA to play the Rams? I'm going to take the Bills here, although I think the Rams could keep it close. The line's not that big. It's only 3.5.
Yeah, the Bills, they came out here a couple of years ago. I saw them when they came out. It was to open the season after the Rams had won the Super Bowl. The Bills showed up and stomped the Rams in that game. This Bills team is playing with a lot of juice on both sides of the ball, and they have every bit of motivation because, for once, they finally built their team to fit their stadium in January. They are not a slinging around the yard. They want to run the ball down your throat. And guess what? That works in the snow, as we finally just saw. So they know they want to play the Chiefs at home again. So there's too much on the line for Buffalo, so I got to take the Bills.
Yeah. I'd like to do the upset here, but I'm going to take the Bills. I just think Josh Allen's going to be too much for those guys, and James Cook is great in the red zone. So it's got to be Bills here.
All right. How about heading over to another game that nobody's going to be watching, the Bears at the 49ers?
I'm going to be watching it because I want to see Caleb. I want to see some more continued. I want to have a full vision of what Caleb is, so I'm trying to watch as much of him as possible to see what he is by the end of the year, but I'm actually going to go with the 49ers. I think I think this is a get-right game for them. The Bears are going to have an opportunity, though, because this is the 49ers when they're most vulnerable. But I think Purdy's going to – he's probably feeling a little better from that shoulder. I see something for Juwan Jennings and Kittle. And, we plug in these guys in the 49ers backfield, whether it's Garendo or not, but Jeff Wilson Jr., Elijah Mitchell, we've seen guys be productive. So I could see them be productive as long as Trent Williams is back.
Yeah, if this game was in Chicago, I'd probably take the Bears. But their defense on the road has been pretty bad most of the year. It's San Fran's season. They lose this game, their season's over. So I'm gonna take the Niners in a close game.
No, I'm going to take the Bears here. I think the Niners season is already over. Nick Bosa's out. Devo's still out. Everybody looks hurt. The Bears are actually starting their starting guys, and we talked about a couple weeks ago, the new coach bump. Yeah, they're going for new coach bump number 2. But everybody on that Bears team seemed to be ready for that coach to leave. And you're playing against a team who's hurt, who's beat up, who's lost most of their studs. And Brock Purdy has looked pretty awful this year. 13 touchdowns, 8 picks. I'm taking the Bears to step up and take it. 1 second. And then that leaves us, which game am I missing here still? The Bengals-Cowboys on Monday night. Cooper Rush, can he come in and lead the team to victory under the bright lights at the stadium, Kendall? Or are the Bengals still playing this year, or have they quit?
No, I mean, the Bengals offense is clearly still playing. Just listen to Jamar Chase. They got to score every possession, which they might be able to do against Dallas's defense. But there's an age-old saying that I generally live by, and when you have a defense that is almost historically bad, it's hard for me to ever take that team, especially when the opposing defense is actually pretty good. And since they've gotten healthier on that side of the ball, Dallas's defense have been much, much better. Micah is looking more like Micah. And even though I don't believe there's any chance, I know mathematically there's a 3% chance the Cowboys make the playoffs. I personally believe there's a 0% chance. There is no chance they're going to the playoffs. But Micah on his podcast coming out and saying, we're improving, we're going to get there, we're coming, that at least inspires some confidence in his teammates. They're going to play hard. Whereas, like you touched on, Drew, like, who knows who the hell is going to show up for Cincinnati at this point. So I'm going to take the Cowboys in that game.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys defense is much better than or at least playing much better than the Cincinnati defense. They're awful, but the firepower for Cincinnati, I think, is going to be too much. I think the Bengals defense is going to make Cooper Rush look pretty competent, and I think they're going to move the ball. But I just think Cincinnati is going to put up more points than the Dallas Cowboys do, and that's how you win a game. So, I'm gonna pick Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with you guys, or with Kendall, and take the Cowboys here. I just think Cincinnati's defense is too bad, and at some point that offense is going to stop trying as hard as they've been trying, and I think this is the week. Which brings us time for Kendall's Corner. We're going to turn it over here to Kendall Capps for his weekly betting tips. Kendall, what do you got for us?
All right, so last week, we thought we had a lock on a college football game, and I let my, I guess, love for Michigan blind me, and I took Ohio State, thought they were going to cruise. That did not work out. But at the end of the day, it made me rather happy. I'd rather lose money and watch Michigan win. So I got that going for me. So we're going to stay away from those parlays. It's time to tease. This week, we're going to tease the Chargers up to 9.5, tease the Dolphins down to just a 0.5 point, and tease the Vegas Buccaneers over to over 40.5. Put those three together, you get plus 140. I really think you can make a very strong argument for all three of those. You're getting better than even money. That's a solid bet. And then I want to go back to the futures. I touched on it last week, and even though Philly beat Baltimore, I thought they were going to lose to Baltimore and you get even better odds this week. But their odds only came down to plus 250 to win the NFC. Detroit's slipped to plus 155. So I think if you make a bet on both of those teams, if you bet $100 on the Lions to make the Super Bowl, $100 on the Eagles to make the Super Bowl, I believe you are guaranteed to either make $55 or $150 because there is no one in the NFC that is not named the Lions or the Eagles going to the Super Bowl. Take it to the bank. Let's make some money.
I love it. I was going to say you can actually get really, really good odds if you parlay Detroit to win the NFC and Philly to win the NFC. Then if they both win, if they both win, it's insane what you'd get paid out. All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening to the Winning Play Podcast. Follow us on social media at the Winning Play Pod. For Kendall Capps, Rob Hugh, I'm Drew James. Come see us next week. Until then, go make some winning plays.